Hey everyone, it is another amazing day, and we have a very special guest on our virtual couch today. We're going to talk about childbirth trauma. Now, we've touched on this topic before from the clinician's perspective, but today we are honored to have Brianna Singer, also known as AKA Bree, on her social media handles and accounts, and she's going to share with us her experience as a mom, as a Black mom, which is we're all learning is a very unique experience that warrants a lot of attention. So we're going to talk about that in more detail as well. And I do want to mention that Brie is an author. Okay, make sure you check out her book. And Brie, it is
If I can
if I can
dream it,
dream it,
if I
then I
can,
can
I can
be it,
be it.
right?
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, show us that book. If I can dream it,
I
then I
can.
can be it. And so, as you guys know, we believe in representation. We believe that representation matters. That's why we have this platform. So, Bree, thank you for sharing your book with us. I will put the
Mhm.
details in the content of this video. So,
Okay.
we're going to move right along. So, as you all may know, there was another documentary that aired recently on Hulu that talked about the Black mother's experience of childbirth in the US. This one was called Aftershock. It was taken from the perspective of the fathers who had lost their significant others and had to now raise children without the mother. So Brie is going to help us to understand what that experience is like to experience childbirth trauma and to be a Black pregnant woman in the US. So, Bree, thank you for joining us today. Take us back to when you realized that your experience as a Black woman was probably different than other women.
My experience was I realized that when I found out that I was having twins, and I remember when they were trying to figure out, like, just your medical history, your mother medical history, and
Mm-hmm.
things. And my mother and was actually a breast cancer survivor at the time when this was going on. I had let them know about that history, and while I'm there to find out more about my pregnancy, she wanted to speak more about me, getting some surgery to move my breasts, and it was not very little about what I was actually experiencing, finding out that I was pregnant. And also, when I did find out that I was having twins, she told me, don't get that excited. You're more likely going to have a miscarriage. And because I actually got pregnant when I was 37, so I was considered high risk. And so that alone right there was traumatic because I didn't even think about the possibility of miscarrying my kids. But to be like, don't be excited. You're more than likely going to lose your kids. That was very heartbreaking.
Wow. So when you heard those words, did it emotionally hit you at that time? Or was it after you left the office and you sort of replayed your experience, then you realized how traumatizing those words were for you? Which one occurred? Was it at
I
the
was, I,
moment?
I was no, it affected me at the time. She was very rude. She wasn't warm.
Mm-hmm.
Instances of what I was experiencing in my pregnancy, I had a lot of morning sickness when I was pregnant, and I because this was my first time becoming a mother, I didn't really know, like, if I could get time off of work because I work at FedEx, so I was going, I don't want to say puking, but that's what it was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You could say it. That's where we keep it real here. You could
I
say
was
it.
okay. I was puking constantly, and I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to continue to keep coming here. I could barely hold anything down, and so I wanted to know what my options were. And
Mm-hmm.
he then told me, "Oh, I'm not going to go to jail for you." And I was like, "Hold on, wait a minute, jail? I'm not asking you to do anything illegal." So just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
her assumption, thinking that I was asking her to do something that could possibly get her fired from her job. I'm like, this is my first time even meeting you. I don't know who you are, and let alone would I ever ask you to do something that would jeopardize your job. I just want to know what
Mm-hmm.
options are. And so So yeah, that was my first visit, finding out that I was expecting twins.
Wow. So you're getting this, I mean, you're getting this amazing news because having twins is not your everyday experience, all right? It is a
Right.
very unique blessing. And you're going in with that joy and
Mhm.
with some clear concerns because of your pregnancy symptoms, and you encounter this individual who just, seemed like out of touch, lacking sympathy, lacking bedside manner. Take me back to when you decided to go to this particular provider, because I think one of the challenges for women of color, specifically for Black women, especially given the context of all the issues with maternal health, is finding providers that are culturally competent, that are empathetic. So, how did you end up with this particular provider? How
I
did
was
that
just
happen?
I was just recommended by my doctor to go to her. She said go to her. So I because she didn't deal with pregnancies and things like that. So she
Uh-huh.
recommended her, and it was at Northridge Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought my experience would be different because she was Indian, so I consider her a woman of color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I thought that because I was aware of how we as Black women experience being.
Okay, touch on that. What were you aware of at that point?
I was aware that we don't really get treated the same.
Mm-hmm.
The father of my kids, when we were dating or whatever, he will always remind me, you know how they do Black women, you know how they do Black
Mm-hmm.
women. And so I went in there, I thought because she was a woman of color, she was in,
Mm-hmm.
well, and maybe my experience wouldn't be that because maybe there would be some type of understanding, some type of
Mm-hmm.
compassion
Mm-hmm.
there. But that was not the case. And the real sad part about it, she was actually pregnant, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's actually an interesting perspective. So not only should she have been empathetic because she was pregnant, but also as a woman of color. That's interesting. And then it raises a really good point because we do know that the major underlying factor to the despairing experience of women of color, specifically Black women, in terms of maternal health has to do with racism that gets manifest in different ways. And this is just a perfect example and an unfortunate reminder that even as people of color being trained in this particular society, that you too can become a vehicle of racism as a person of color as well. And we see this in all diversity of experiences. We see this in law enforcement experiences. There's actually videos going around of a Black woman recently that was um, treated less than kind, we should say, by a police officer who was a Black man. And that was one of the questions that was raised was, you know, can this be racism? Can we call this racism? And the answer is yes, we can. Because being a person of color doesn't mean that you are isolated or resistant to or protected or uniquely not able to perpetrate some of those notions about Black people. And perhaps she already had some underlying preconceived ideas about women of color because it seemed to be that undertone of the expectation of falsifying claims and fraudulent activity, the expectation of a miscarriage with yes, we know that miscarriages are more common with women who are over the age of 35. But number one, your first appointment is not really the first conversation, not really the time to really mention that in someone who's already coming in with concerns because you are already having recurrent vomiting. So you're already coming in with concerns, but also too, the far majority of pregnancies end up healthy. So that is not a necessary license to go around and tell other women, especially being pregnant yourself, that
Yes.
you're likely to miscarry. Does it when you thought about those words that you are before you were able to have some positive reinforcement, Were you more concerned about miscarrying after that point, now that you became aware that that is a risk factor
I,
and that it is a concern?
it was never a concern to me
Mm-hmm.
because I know plenty of women who are over the age of 35 that have healthy babies. Some of those women are in my family. I knew that I took took care of myself very well. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't really a concern of mine. My concern was, okay, this definitely cannot be my doctor. Um,
That part.
she cannot
Mm-hmm.
be my doctor, and so now I have to find out who is going to be my doctor.
Mm-hmm.
That was the beginning of my journey of who is going to be my doctor, and that journey was very difficult.
That's interesting because I'm glad that you said that point in particular because a lot of women kind of feel like there is no choice, especially when you're referred to an individual by your primary care physician or primary care provider. Some women feel obligated to stay with that person. So, what made you realize or feel that you were empowered to make that choice?
Well, one of the nurses had came to me, uh, who was witnessing all what I was experiencing, and she had gave me an exam. And with their insurance, they only cover a certain amount of exams or so.
Mm-hmm.
Would be responsible for paying for some, but if you have to do another, you might have to cover some of that. And so she told me, she said, the nurse pulled me to the side, and she could have gotten fired for this. And she said, listen, she don't do this because she's going to charge you. She said she recommended this, but don't do that because she already did it. And if you do it again, it's going to cost you $1,000 out of pocket. And,
Mm-hmm.
and she pulled me to the side and said, don't do that. And from her to pretty much risk her job, let me know that this cannot be my doctor based on my own personal experience and the fact that she was willing to warn someone she had never met a day in her life to not
Mm-hmm.
she knew was that she knew that I was just being taken advantage of. So she was like,
Right.
don't. And so that was my beginning of looking for another doctor.
Can I ask you, what was the ethnicity of that nurse?
She was Latino.
Okay. Okay. So
Mm,
another woman of color.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so before that on your own, you weren't necessarily actively seeking a different provider. That was the turning point for you. Did I get
Yes,
that correctly?
that was my first time even meeting that doctor. I've never
Mm-hmm.
first experience. So going in, I thought the experience was going to be positive. You know,
Mm-hmm.
me and the child father went together, and
Mm-hmm.
the positive day. It wasn't. I just was excited to know what I was going to have, and I was very surprised. It was twins, and so just for that to be my first experience, I was just really sad about it. Because
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a very joyful experience for me. Like she took
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Especially since you're saying that that was the moment that you realized that it was a twin pregnancy.
Yes.
Which is
Mm-hmm.
usually this, you see all the social media posts about that moment and how just joyful and incredible that moment is. So it's almost like she showed that experience and that opportunity for you. And breaking another stereotype, because another stereotype is that Black women show up to our appointments alone, that we don't have partners, that we don't have the involvement of the father of the baby. So again, another stereotype that it's oftentimes said is the expectation that we're coming to our appointments alone, and we're coming alone because of the assumption that the father of the baby is not involved or
Mm-hmm.
a broken relationship. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, also breaking yet another stereotype. Um,
Well, eventually, I ended up having to go to the rest of my appointments
mhm.
by myself based on what he was dealing with and stuff like that with himself. But
Uh-huh.
but the first visit, yeah, he was there with
He was
me.
there. Yeah, yeah. And things happen in relationship, life happens.
Mhm.
But it's just good to show that it's not always that way, right? Even in the same
Right.
relationship, relationships evolve. So tell me, how from here on did it get better? How did things progress?
So well,
Okay.
it didn't get better. Well, number
Uh-huh.
one, that same day, because I'm saying this because I want everyone to just kind of understand what I was dealing with being a first
Mhm.
time. And that same day, I found out my mother, when I was calling my mother, um, first of all, I didn't want to tell anybody because she said I might miscarry. So I was like, let me wait down the line. But
Mhm.
my mother had told me she just got diagnosed on that same, it was September 9th,
Mhm.
with lung cancer. And so,
Oh.
so yeah, so I was taking in a whole lot. And then so, of course, I just told her because I was like, it was like stage 3. And I just like, well, let me just tell her what maybe this will bring some joy to her life and, give
Mhm.
reason to fight this in and stuff. And so I did express it to her. And then I was dealing with problems with the kid's father. So I was really stressed during my pregnancy. And
Mhm.
also I had to look for another doctor.
Mhm.
I went on Google and I was
Mhm.
this just because the reviews are good doesn't mean your experience will be their experience, right?
That part.
And
Mhm. And look at who's reviewing it, right?
right.
Yeah.
And I never gave her a bad review. I should actually go back and do that. But
Yes. Mhm.
I ended up choosing a woman who was up here, Google was highly recommended. She had a lot of,
Uh-huh.
and I experienced to be natural. I wanted to have a natural birth. I know
Mhm.
women that have had twins that had them naturally,
Mhm.
and everything that I was seeing was telling me I had to have a C-section. And I was like, I don't want a C-section. I wanted to have naturally. She was the only doctor that told me that I can have that experience with her office was very green. I'm a very green person, so like vegan and all this stuff. So I was like, oh, this is going to be the perfect experience and stuff. And
Mhm.
because this is my first experience, and I ended up doing it after that day mostly by myself.
Mhm.
I didn't know what to expect because one of the things is no one really talked to me about like pregnancy only and when they did it was nothing negative, it was all positive. So I didn't know what to expect when with these doctors or what my experience should look like. I didn't know.
Mhm.
And so dealing with her in the beginning was fine. I mean, I didn't have any really, it wasn't really that bad, but my sister
Mhm.
came to me when she was able to, came with me to my appointment, and she said, got a bad feeling about her. I really feel like you should find another doctor. And but
Mhm.
was everybody wanted me to have a C-section. And I was like, look, she seemed okay. I don't want to keep having to look for a doctor, but I was driving from Chad. I was pretty much driving like probably over 20 miles to my doctor appointments. And most of the time I was doing this by myself, right?
Mhm.
This is like, this is too far. When you get further along in your pregnancy, it's going to be really difficult. I suggest you talk to your doctor. And I said, okay. So I talked to my doctor, her at the time, and I said, my sister tells me that, further along, do you recommend me to, see someone closer, She said,
Mhm.
oh, no, it'll be fine. It'll be perfectly fine. And I said, well, I don't have anyone to drive me to these appointments. I have to drive myself. And she said, oh, you'll be fine. I have plenty of mothers doing it, which was not really, really, she should have told me to go find someone closer. I mean, realistically,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's when you get bigger, your stomach gets bigger, you're driving your car, your stomach's sitting
And
high
then
up on
twins.
the
Yeah.
twins on the hill. It was the most miserable experience that I've ever went through, but I'm
Mhm.
trying to tough it out because I just didn't want to have to go to another doctor.
Mhm.
Mm.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't want, I don't know if you want me to keep going or did you
Yeah,
want.
yeah, no, yeah, I do. Like, how did things progress in terms of like childbirth? How did that go?
Well, in my process, I was being told my daughter
Mhm.
is, man, if you see my daughter, she's the most vibrant thing on this planet. But they were telling me we can't see her heart. We can't see her heart. And I was doing these appointments by myself, and they were like, well, I had to go see several specialists and all these things.
Mhm.
All these things was costing money, right?
Mhm.
And so I remember going home crying, thinking only one of my kids would be able to survive the pregnancy. And I remember my friend who was what helped me is that my friend's a midwife, and
Mhm.
told me, she said, you look. what do you feel inside you? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
babies. And she said, and you trust that. She said, you trust what you're feeling. And she said, and you speak their names and you say their, because at that time it was called A and B.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and after that experience, I was like, okay, I started getting a little bit more stronger in my inside, feeling
Mm-hmm.
a little more better. And then
Mm-hmm.
I was at 37 weeks because when you have twins, you're supposed to, they want you to deliver them earlier, right? They don't want you to go to full 40 weeks.
It depends on what type of twins we're dealing with, but they usually don't go to 40 weeks.
Yeah, I went
Mm-hmm.
40, ended up going 41 weeks, but the only reason why
Mm-hmm.
was because when I was scheduled to deliver, um, she said, mind you, I'm a single mother. I'm not working, I'm on disability, and so I'm only getting a portion of what I was getting. I still have to maintain my housing bills and all the bills on me, right? And so I remember her telling me, I said, well, my check doesn't come until a couple weeks. And so I can give you something then. And she said, and it was not a lot, it was only $300.
Mm-hmm.
That if you don't pay me my $300, I will not deliver your babies. And I remember I was in the tub because I was
Oh,
huge and I was, was swelling a lot. And she said, we won't take your blood. I won't do, I won't, you'll have to just go to the hospital. That's what she told me.
wow.
And I said, well, it's nothing that I could do because I didn't want to stress
Mm-hmm.
my mother out because she was dealing with her cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to go there. And so I was just like, okay. And then my friend, who is a midwife and an RN
Mm-hmm.
nurse, told me that it's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot do that. And wouldn't give her a piece of her mind. Called her up and gave her a piece of her mind,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
order. And then she told me, oh no, come in, come in. But at that time, I just didn't trust her anymore.
Yeah, yeah, she's broken
So
the trust with you. Uh-huh.
yeah, couldn't do it. So now at 37 weeks, I'm having to find another doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At
And
37 weeks, which is hard to do because a lot of insurance plans won't allow you to transfer
right.
that far into pregnancy. So I'm sure that was an obstacle in of itself. How did you end up finding another doctor?
Because my friend's a midwife and it was her friend
Mm-hmm.
was on leave for his having his first child. And
Mm-hmm.
so he came back just to deliver my twins.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is I never wanted a male doctor because I've had terrible experiences with male doctors, and so
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted a woman doctor, and he was amazing. He was a great doctor. He was very,
Mm-hmm.
and the crazy part about it was she wouldn't send him my records over, so he kept
Mm-hmm.
asking me to send her information, her records, so I could know, and so she wouldn't she
Right.
sending them, and she never did. And so
Wow.
all of my NST appointments were coming out okay, they were coming out fine. I didn't have high blood pressure or anything like that.
Okay, good. Uh-huh.
It wasn't until I actually got to the hospital and they induced me because my water
Mm-hmm.
broke. I was 41 weeks. My
Mm-hmm.
neck broke and I remember being in a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
They induced me, but I just thought that was normal because I didn't know what contractions felt like. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
form of contractions. And so I remember he said, I will be back in 12 hours and just get some rest. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say about 30 minutes, the nurse, he left in 30 minutes, maybe, or even an hour,
Mm-hmm.
back to me and she said, oh, the doctor's on his way back. And I said, what's going on? Because he
Mm-hmm.
said, hours. She said, I can't say anything right now, but he's on his way back.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out it was preeclampsia help when he got,
Mm-hmm.
and that I had 4 hours to save me and the baby's lives. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that you still have a natural birth if you want to, but you won't be able to, get any assistance with that. And we have only 4 hours. And I just thought, okay, well, let's just do the C-section,
Mm-hmm.
since we only have 4 hours. And I've seen videos, it could take a long time for a baby to kind of push out sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to risk my life on my baby's life.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So walk me through you hearing now that you're in the hospital, you're expecting this, you have this vision of your childbirth, right?
Yeah.
And you shared with us that part of that vision is having a natural birth. How are you now taking in this new information that not only says that you have an underlying diagnosis that has certain outcomes that are very serious outcomes, but
Mhm.
now this fantasy or this vision that you have of your childbirth is now completely the opposite. How did you take that information?
I took it. I mean, it was hard because everything was moving so fast, and I had to process and make decisions. Now I didn't have time, and so I remember getting handed a paper about if I weren't able to survive, if I didn't survive the pregnancy, who I would want my kids to go to. And I had to kind of like process all of these things. Like, okay, I didn't even think about dying, you know. And then all of a sudden, as soon as I signed the paper, it was like maybe 20, so many people, doctors, nurses, I don't even know, coming
Mm-hmm.
in, putting me on, whatever they call it, the,
Mm-hmm. The stretcher?
table. Yeah.
Oh, the operating room table?
Yes. And
Mm-hmm.
strapping me down and
Mm-hmm.
strapping my
Yeah.
arm way, strapping my arm this way, strapping a leg this way, strapping my other leg this way. And I remember I started to panic. I started to
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
like my anxiety level was up, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I was going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And wait, I remember before she could put me to sleep, I said, wait, this is a lot. Wait, just give me a
Mm-hmm.
second, a
Mm-hmm.
moment, sis. And I remember one of the doctors, not my doctor, but one of the doctors that was assisting him said, "You had 9 months to be ready for this." And I said, "No, sir, I have today to be ready for all of this because this was
Mm-hmm.
it." You know,
Wow. In the midst of you saying that, his response was, you have 9 months to be ready.
yeah,
Oh,
he said, "You have 9 months to be ready for
we will
this."
get back to that statement, okay? Because I definitely want to talk about that statement right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So walk me through now. Did you get that moment, by the way?
Yes, it was a very nice nurse that
Mm-hmm.
came to me, and she had some kind of compassion and
Mm-hmm.
said, "Okay, give her a moment." And I took a deep breath, and she said, "Don't worry, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be fine." And I just prayed. I just remember praying to God, I said, "Lord, please let me see my babies. Let me just live to."
Mm-hmm.
It was very traumatic. It's hard, but
Yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing. And if you need a moment, definitely do not hesitate to let me know that you need a moment.
yeah.
Um, that's a lot to take in, and it's because of women like yourself who are speaking out that as a clinician, I'm so much even more. I mean, I was always kind of conscious about the woman's experience, but it just has made me so much more alert, even to the nonverbal communication,
Mhm.
looking to see if a woman, when, especially when you're delivering hard news,
Yeah.
difficult news, news that has that you're sharing that her either herself or her unborn child or children's life are at risk. It's important to also read the nonverbal because sometimes not all women have the strength or the emotional strength to express that they need that moment. So I'm so thankful to women like you who are coming out, who are boldly sharing your experience because it has made clinicians like myself, which is why we're doing this, so much more sensitive to even looking for the signs that someone may be overwhelmed by an experience. And so I actively do ask women like, how are you doing with the information I'm sharing? Because it's important for their health, their mental health, their emotional health,
Mhm.
that they're able to understand the information, understand the implications of the information is, and process the change, the sudden change in sort of the vision of their pregnancy and the vision of the outcome of their pregnancy. So no, that's such a critical part of your story, and I'm thankful that you highlighted that moment because it is actually that is actually the moment I think for a lot of women that if it is ignored and you do not receive that moment, that it just becomes that much more traumatizing,
Yeah. Hmm.
that much more traumatic. Yeah. So then you had the C-section, you come out of the C-section. How is your health at this point?
Well, coming out of the C-section was like this whole experience was very traumatic for me because I went to the hospital with family, but when I woke up, I was alone.
Mm,
And I didn't know at the time that they were refusing. One of my relatives that was with me had to leave, and they would not allow my other relative to take her place. I wasn't told that.
oh,
I
okay.
wasn't told that. And so when I woke up, I was by myself. And when I asked them, I said, well, no one's, I said, it's my family here. And they said, no one's here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, can I see my babies? And they said, well, not right now because you're still coming off your medication
Mm-hmm.
by yourself. And I was just like, wow. And so I still processing everything. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in pain because I'm on medication.
Mm-hmm.
My phone next to my bedside, I remember looking at my phone and I saw my baby's first pictures on Instagram because my family was so excited
Mm-hmm.
that they shared it with the rest of my family and they posted it.
Oh.
And I was like, take it down, take it down, take it down, take it
Mm-hmm.
down.
Mm-hmm. Because you haven't even had a chance to see your own children.
Yeah, I just see my own kids. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so eventually they allowed one of my relatives to come up
Oh.
and I was able to finally see my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot dealing with this hospital because this wasn't the hospital I wanted. And mind you, I was all the way in Linwood when I finally, because I had to go to the doctor that would actually deliver my twins, and he only
Mm-hmm.
hospital in Linwood. So I
Oh,
live all
yeah.
the way in Chatsworth. I'm like, oh, an hour pretty much away
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
where I stay. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot. It was a lot.
And how was your postpartum recovery?
It was difficult, but I had the doctor who delivered my twins, he was amazing because I
Mm-hmm.
remember, um, mind you, my blood pressure would not go down for the longest. My blood pressure stayed. They didn't even want to release me. I had already been there in a week in the hospital, and I said they wanted to keep me another week, and I said absolutely not. I'm going home with my baby.
Mm-hmm.
My son
Mm-hmm.
was 7 pounds and 9 ounces. My daughter was 6 pounds and 5 ounces. So they were allowed to go home with me. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
my cousin, she works in the medical field. She would manage my blood pressure. I will stay with her. I need
Mm-hmm.
to go to the hospital. And so he said, okay, he was like, just make sure you call me and I'll be checking up on you. And
Uh-huh.
fine. I said, okay. And then he asked, how am I feeling? I said, oh, I'm okay. I'm fine. He said, listen, it's okay. It's all right to mourn your pregnancy. And that's the first time I ever felt like it was okay. Because when you think about giving birth, you don't think of
Mm-hmm.
the negative outcomes. I mean, to me, it was a positive outcome because I have two beautiful
Right, right.
twins.
But we get what you're saying.
Yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like because I know that there are mothers that don't get to come out with their kids
Yeah.
that don't, you know,
Yeah.
that I was allowed to have these emotions that
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling. So whenever someone asked me how I was feeling, I will always say, "Oh, I'm okay. I'm fine. I am a mom. I have two beautiful babies. I'm okay."
Mm-hmm.
I was really depressed. I was really sad. I didn't really know that my family was trying to get upstairs and see me and that
Mm-hmm.
they were being allowed up. I didn't know that until afterwards. So at the time, I felt like everybody kind of abandoned me,
Mm-hmm.
very abandoned. And so I had to mourn that I didn't have this wonderful,
Yeah.
joyous pregnancy, natural birth that I planned to have, and
Mm-hmm.
it took time. It took time. But um, I would say just speaking positive affirmations in my life, praying,
Mm-hmm.
my family just surrounding me with love, my friends surrounding me with love is what
Mm-hmm.
through. Um, and my two beautiful babies, that I had to care for got me through those difficult times.
Wow, there is so much, Bree. There is so much I can unpack and would love to unpack. So I may have to bring you back because I'm not gonna get to everything today. I know I'm not, but we
Mhm.
gotta really dissect this out a lot more. But I do want to touch on very key things that you said. One, for our audience who's watching, you're probably wondering, Bree mentioned a condition that's really important for women of color to know, especially Black women, because being a Black woman is considered to be, I always like to rechange and rephrase that, but I'm going to tell you the standard phrasing of it. Being a Black woman is considered to be a high risk factor for preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is a condition that happens only in pregnancy. It is associated with a high blood pressure, oftentimes spilling of protein in the urine. Some women who have symptoms of preeclampsia are considered to be a severe form of preeclampsia. Bree had a variant of preeclampsia, which is called HELLP syndrome. HELLP syndrome is a very serious condition because it results in a dysfunction of the function of the liver. It results in very low platelets. It results in hemolysis that lead to a very low hemoglobin level. So people with HELLP syndrome can require multiple transfusion. The risk of death is real. It is a higher risk of death, and preeclampsia is one of the most common conditions that lead to serious complications with pregnancy, including death of mom and or baby. So it's very, very serious. So just to give you some insight as to the heaviness of the diagnosis for a mom who is going into the hospital with the expectation of having a particular type of birth or particular type of experience, and then getting this type of diagnosis. And as Bree mentioned, a prolonged or extended hospital stay as a result of all the related complications that are subsequent to preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome, which again is a variant of preeclampsia that is a very severe form of preeclampsia. So thank you for sharing that. But one of the things that I thought that you mentioned that I thought was really, really just so poignant is the fact that you can both be grateful and grieving at the same time.
Mhm. Yes.
And that I think is something that we're just really starting to um, give people the permission that it's okay. Because oftentimes the expectation is, why aren't you grateful? Because you have to, like you said, bring two healthy babies. They're here. You're a mom now. There are people who have worse experience. And that whole concept of the comparison of people's worst experience, I think is one of the most unhealthy things that we do because it stifles the natural grieving process that we're supposed to go to. So anything that stifles the grieving process just even amplifies the trauma even that much more. And I'm not a psychologist. I just deal with this stuff on a regular basis. So learning through my profession, I've learned these things. So thank you for making that just amazing poignant point about the dichotomy of the relationship of grief and gratefulness at the
Mhm.
same time. And it's so important that you're allowed to experience both of them to its fullest in order to truly heal from an experience like this. Do you consider yourself healed?
I consider myself healed from the trauma of it all. I accept it as that being my experience. And I feel like, I wish that more mothers spoke about their experiences because I think it's very helpful that we share our stories. Because I mean, the outcome is great because I have beautiful twins,
Mm-hmm.
that I get to smile at and hold every single day.
Mm-hmm.
The sad part was just the whole journey of it all was not a great experience at all. Even the hospital stay, how
Mm-hmm.
treated by some of the nurses, how when I was breastfeeding, I remember I was breastfeeding, but my son took a minute to latch on, and I needed to get a lactation consultant. And I actually,
Mm-hmm.
as kind as she is, she paid to send me a lactation consultant because she knew how much I wanted to breastfeed, and he was
Mm-hmm.
struggling with it. And I remember the nurse telling me he was sucking on a pacifier, and I just finished trying to nurse him, and he was sucking on a
Mm-hmm.
pacifier at the time, and she said, "Why do you have that pacifier in his mouth? You need to be nursing him. Why are you not nursing him? You shouldn't." I'm like, ma'am, the pacifier came from the hospital. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you provided the pacifier. If you didn't want me to use the pacifier, why would you
Mm-hmm.
provide for me? But she was very, my friend being a midwife and an RN, she, gave her a few words and told her
Mm-hmm.
and she kind of backed off of me. And then she became the
Mm-hmm.
victim and said I was attacking her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this whole experience for me was crazy, but it also showed me how we are treated as Black women in these spaces.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because I mean, I had a great doctor that ended up
Mm-hmm.
delivering kids, but everyone to surrounding that was not such a great experience at all. It
Yeah,
was
on
really.
so very many levels. I just want to take a quick moment to go through some of the things that your experience has highlighted in terms of the Black woman's experience when it comes to pregnancy and childbirth in the US. Oftentimes people are asking, well, how is it different? And there are people who are generally ignorant to it,
Yeah.
including other people of color, because they may not necessarily have had the experience or be alerted to the fact that certain aspects of their experience is evidence of this very thing. So we're going to highlight a couple of things of why their experience of Black women is so unique, and how racism is sort of the woven factor between all of these particular experiences. So one, we talked about, Bree mentioned in the very beginning of her experience that finances was a concern for her, right?
Mhm.
Making sure, knowing that she was considered to be a high risk pregnancy, and oftentimes high risk pregnancy require more visits to the doctor, which then, depending on your insurance plan, can lead to additional costs. So just even the fact that because we tend to have certain types of disease processes because of our experience in this country, from a multitude of levels, we're more likely to be diabetic, more likely to be hypertensive, or have those particular manifestations during pregnancy. We're more likely to come in with high stress levels, right? Speaking of stress levels, Bree also mentioned the fact that at the same time, her mom was diagnosed with lung cancer, her mom, who's also at the time a breast cancer survivor. Keeping in mind that that is also another example of the disparity in healthcare. We know that breast cancer is more aggressive in women of color. So again, adding to the unique experience, as women of color, we're more likely to have family members with breast cancer who are less likely to survive. So dealing with that social factor, not to mention job-related factor, Bree also mentioned her concern for her employment because as a result of her pregnancy symptoms, routine symptoms. These are symptoms that happen to anyone who is bringing life into this world. But as Black women, we always have to be so conscious about our finances, about our work security, and things like that. Again, another aspect of the unique experience of a Black woman. I'm going to skip the next one because I can't read my handwriting, but we're going to come back to that. And then Bree also mentioned just even her baseline awareness of pregnancy and what to expect. And that's, we know, information sharing is lacking in our community. We're less likely to get exposure to the required information. And thankfully, Bree had an advocate. We're going to talk about that fantastic friend she has in a moment, and how she represents sort of the key to the answer of the maternal mortality issue or maternal morbidity issue in the US when it comes to Black women. But again, being able to I'm really trying to remember what I wrote there, but we go skip it because I have a lot of things I could talk about. So in being able to have that insight and that information even before getting pregnant, which is really our goal. That's why we're doing this platform. So the women are more aware
Yeah.
of pregnancy and what to expect, and not even just of the pregnancy itself, because Bree, you talked about just the system, the healthcare system, and how things work, and having that information to understand what are your rights, what are your choices. Oh yes, I can shop for a clinician. If I don't like that one, I can shop for another one. And then Bree also brought up the the question of just about having the ability to have the freedom of choice in her care and having to then search for a doctor that would allow her to be an active participant in her own healthcare. Another disparity that Black women experience, where oftentimes aren't allowed to be a decision maker or active participant in our own healthcare. And it leads us to searching for the limited providers that would allow us to do so. And then Bree also brought up the distance of having to travel 20 miles. And we know that access is an issue. So again, a pregnant mom having twins, she was vomiting in the beginning of her pregnancy. Now she's traveling 20 miles pregnant with twins in LA traffic. And if anybody knows about LA traffic, that alone is a stress factor, okay? For anybody, pregnant, not pregnant. So add to that the LA traffic to that scenario. Again, we're seeing how the impact of limited access affects the healthcare of women of color. And then she talked about something that a lot of women experience but don't really share. So again, we thank you, Bree, for sharing this. The decision to at some point disconnect from the pregnancy. So when you are being told that you're more likely to have these adverse outcomes, or that you are actually having a complication that is associated with adverse outcomes, a common response for a lot of women is to stop bonding with the pregnancy as emotional protection, right? And so oftentimes what happens is if that's not recognized, so thankful again to her advocate who recognized that and encouraged her to continue bonding with the pregnancy. But a lot of women don't have that village, don't have that advocacy, don't have that positive reinforcement, and they will disconnect from the baby. And so once the baby's born, now the negative outcome didn't happen, everybody survived, but now I'm not connected to my babies. I'm not connected to my child.
Yeah.
And now I'm more likely to experience postpartum depression because I can't seem to, I expected to have this connection, but now I'm starting the connection and the bonding at birth, which you're tired, you're exhausted, you're frustrated because you're trying to keep up with the demands of motherhood and you don't have that underlying foundational bonding to begin with. So another factor. And then we talked about HELLP syndrome, preeclampsia, more common in Black women, so much so that we are the only ethnic group that is considered to be high risk. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen in other ethnic groups, it does. But as a high risk factor, to the point where we now have an intervention with low dose aspirin, Black women are the only race that is considered to be a moderate risk factor. Think about that. Okay. So now we have certain disease processes that are more common with us. And now that we know this, it adds another level of stress to our experience. And then in the end of it, in the moment of processing, Bree, were you ever offered a mental health provider, a therapist?
I was not. And with the doctor that I actually ended up going to before I ended up with the last doctor,
Uh-huh.
another thing, she didn't ask me how I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
She asked, like, are your feet swelling? Because my NSTs, my blood pressure wasn't showing up as not normal.
Mm-hmm.
It was fine. But she never asked those questions. Maybe she could have, I don't know, maybe done more blood work to kind of find.
Well, the thing too, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I should mention is preeclampsia can happen at any point after 20 weeks of pregnancy through the end of the postpartum period. So some women may experience preeclampsia while they're still preterm, and that makes it a lot more complicated in terms of deciding to deliver. Some people experience it towards the end of the pregnancy of full term. Some women experience it during the labor process or during the childbirth process. And then some women experience it postpartum. And this is why it's so important. I'm so glad that you brought that up. Sorry that you had to have that experience, but I'm glad that you're using your experience to educate others because it is so important because especially in the postpartum period, people think I'm delivered, I'm done, I'm no longer at risk, and you are still at risk. So it's really important that women are aware of the signs and symptoms of preeclampsia, visual changes, severe headache, if they have symptoms, hand and face swelling, liver pain. Any of those symptoms, sudden onset nausea, vomiting sometimes can be an indication, though it's not a classic sign. It's important for women to know these signs because even after childbirth, it is still an ongoing risk factor. So thank you for bringing that to light. I want to touch on your advocate. She's pretty
Hmm.
amazing. Okay. I mean, she's the midwife, clearly. She dope to begin with. But even as a friend, outside of her profession, as a friend, to be able to be one, knowledgeable about the system, how the system works, knowledgeable about your rights, knowledgeable about motherhood and the pregnancy process to begin with. So to have that resource is amazing, but it's also not common. So could you imagine what your experience would be like had she not been there?
Yeah, my experience was definitely better because Mari and also my cousin Nisi
Mm-hmm.
was there for me
Right.
because
This is the cousin that's a nurse you mentioned,
yeah,
or
she's
she's a
not
healthcare.
she's not a nurse, but
Mm-hmm. She works in healthcare.
she's a behavior therapist. She's a
Oh, okay.
and so, but you know, she knows a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
she helped me out a lot. She actually let me live with her the last month of my pregnancy because I couldn't drive myself to my appointments, so she started driving me to my appointments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Making sure I ate food, making sure I was well taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't let me spend a dime of my own money to do it. She took care of it all. So my cousin Lanice was a very amazing help. And Mari, which is my friend, she delivered my sister babies
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and she's like family to us and stuff. So we already had such a close relationship, and uh, especially when she delivered my niece, me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was another thing because that experience, I was present during that experience. So I kind of was hoping I would have the same kind of experience like my sister had, but
Yeah.
it was completely different. But I would say thank God for Mari for giving me the information I needed because
Mm-hmm.
if she was not there, wouldn't even know that the doctor, uh, she didn't know that I had people in my corner that would give me that kind of information.
Yeah.
He felt comfortable enough to tell me, hey, you don't give me my $300, I'm not delivering your baby. And I'm like 37,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That
And
is incredible. I mean, that too, this is why I'm saying we've got to do a part two because and just talk about the relationship, doctor patient relationship and in terms of the unique dynamics of Black women, because even the nurse that spoke to you, like the tone of her conversation, the tone of what she said, was also very racist in base because oftentimes we're talked to like we're kids, like we have to do what the other person is saying. And that is also part of the slave mentality, not recognizing us as humans, not recognizing us as independent decision makers. So that is also a evidence of and then she did the other thing that she did was to villainize you, which again is a very stereotypical racist approach when someone feels threatened by our autonomy, is that they then turn it and villainize us as people of color to justify their own behavior using the stereotypes of aggression oftentimes when it comes to Black women. So very like we can break all of this stuff down and we will, because I'm gonna beg Bree to come back so we can dissect some of this conversation. And so what I wanted to ask you, Bree, is if there was something that you can share that would be a suggestion, because I'm sure you've really thought about this, thought about your experience. How can we make a difference in the care of women of color, specifically Black women? How can we
uh,
improve?
well, I think that more stories need to be told that are not, I had amazing labor, I pushed my babies out, and I had
Yeah.
a beautiful child, you know? I think that we need to be more comfortable with talking about our trauma. I think that women that don't have birth naturally, that have C-sections, sometimes feel like, you know, their journey to motherhood is not as valued as
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
push their baby out, you know, and stuff. And I think there's a lot that we have to deal with when you have a C-section. You have to deal with the scar. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you have to deal with the healing process. I mean, I
Recovery
was
is
healing.
harder.
Yeah, I was healing, and I remember when I was home and I was at my cousin's house still, and she had some steps, and
Mm-hmm.
still work and take care of herself too. So there were times when it was me and having to walk up the stairs and the pain of that, and
Mm-hmm.
taking the limit amount of Tylenol or aspirin that I was supposed to be taking, and and in having to attend to these beautiful babies that I had,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and stuff, and that in itself was difficult. And I think that more women need to feel comfortable and feel that it's okay that we didn't have the fairy tale experience that some women
Mm-hmm.
and that your experience, even though it wasn't what you wanted it to be, is still your experience. It's still valued, and it's still something to share. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think that because some of these experiences, like mine, is so traumatic that we don't like to share. Number one, we don't like to bring
Yeah.
up memories of it all,
Yeah.
but I don't think that it's who wants to hear about that? Who wants to hear about your pregnancy not being,
Mm-hmm.
this fairy tale pregnancy where you're at the hospital, you have loving people surrounding you,
Mm-hmm.
and you're pushing out your baby, and you know that was not my experience. My experience was doctors coming around like, ah,
Yeah.
strap your arm this way, strap your arm this way, take that way,
Yeah.
strap. So yeah, so I think that hopefully by me sharing what I went through, hopefully more
Mm-hmm.
women are comfortable opening up and knowing that it's okay. This is just my journey to motherhood. And
Right.
it's still a beautiful journey in itself because the journey was to have my kids. And I have that. I have two beautiful kids, a Mila and a Mir.
Yes, I love that. I love what you just said, that it is still a beautiful journey. I mean, let's celebrate how much you have overcome and still are able to persevere and be there for your children. That is the beauty of this story, also, that despite all that you've been through, you were able to still be able to be the mother that you are. Is this experience a factor at all in your decision to whether or not you want more children?
Well, I I have, well, number one, I would definitely have if the Lord see it, I don't see it in my future, but if the Lord see it, hopefully he see a husband.
Oh, we gonna speak it.
uh, because that was also a traumatic experience. The father
Mhm.
was very
Which
he was very
again, unique. I'm glad you mentioned that too. Oh, well, maybe that's one of the ones I forgot. Just mentioning that our relational experiences are unique. And I want to clarify that it does not mean Black women are more likely to be alone just because of relational issues. There are sometimes social factors. The father of the baby may be working and can't be able to take off from work to come in. That is very common because we're so socially suppressed that our finances are very, very limited in terms of having that type of flexibility. It may
Mhm.
be just, technical factors why they can't be there. And it's not always relational, but relational issues do happen.
Yeah.
Stressors happen. Our relationships are tested even more so because we have to deal with the external factor of racism and then somehow build healthy relationships at the same time, which by themselves is one of the hardest things to do. So again, just layers and layers. I'm just trying to point out and show people how things are connected and how racism is so interwoven in all these layers, and trying to help people understand that this is why the experience of being a Black woman is so unique in this country, because we have all these elements that are having an effect on how our pregnancy outcomes are. So really and truly, and I thank you for sharing the fact that having these stories and sharing these stories is important. I also want us to encourage you now, do something with the stories, right? Take these
Mhm.
stories and now make some type of intervention. So we talked about all these different layers and areas that are feeding into foundational racism, that are feeding into the increased stressors that Black women experience that lead to a high level of preeclampsia, a high level of preterm deliveries, a higher level of postpartum depression, right? And now take each one of these factors and deal with them and fix the underlying problem, counter the racism or
Right.
the impact of the racism. So we're gonna wrap up here because if you let me, I will keep going because I have a lot more to say.
Before
Uh,
we wrap up, I want to
sure.
also encourage women to feel comfortable with therapy.
Yeah.
Because when I had conceived my kids, it was because I was looking for therapy in the wrong way. My
Mm.
godson just got murdered,
Oh
and
wow.
had he was 16 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was like a son to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I was in the midst of planning his funeral with his parents. And I was driving back and forth from where I'm originally from, which is Oakland. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I was so depressed and I was so sad because I was so involved in his life, but I moved to Los Angeles that my cousin felt I had some responsibility of why his outcome was his outcome because
Mm.
so far away and because I was so much involved into his life
Mm.
and stuff.
What a weight to put on you. What an
Yeah,
unfair weight. Uh-huh.
and at the time, I didn't go to therapy to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to people. I went to someone to lean on,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know,
And that's very real. That
who,
happens. Mm-hmm.
who was comfort, and
Mm-hmm.
I ended up conceiving
Mm-hmm.
using protection and all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I ended up conceiving
Mm-hmm.
the choice to keep the babies and not
Mm-hmm.
abort them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that was a journey in itself as well, because that wasn't something we both wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, when I made the decision, and he was like, well, I might be there and I might not be there. And I said, well, regardless if you'll be there or not, I'm going to be, okay,
Right.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I will never forget when he made me a smoothie and I
Mm-hmm.
said, send this smoothie. And because I'm very cautious. I'm maybe the Capricorn side of me.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at it. It was papaya and a lot of other fruits that weren't normally going to smoothies. And then I researched it and found out they actually can cause miscarriage. So I was
The
dealing with
seeds. Mm-hmm.
a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
in this
Yeah,
pregnancy.
yeah. And I thank you for highlighting that because again, if you were to ask me, well, where's the racist factor in this? Violence. We're more likely to be exposed to violence in our immediate life.
Mhm,
So again, another source of how racism and how racist disparity affects our lives. And then also, I'm glad that Bree mentioned the fact that she really had to contemplate whether or not to choose parenting or whether or not to terminate the pregnancy. Just another reason for us to be reminded make sure we have some resources. That's something that I think that's what my other point was. Make sure that we have the resources so that when women do decide to parent, that they have the resources they need in all these areas we talk about, their finances, their education, their information exposure, providers that are advocates, good, healthy providers who have healthy relationships with their patients, empathetic providers, sympathetic providers, and make sure that that circulates. Who are the safe providers? That's the word I was looking for. Safe providers for women of color, especially for the Black experience. So these are all areas that we can amend the resource availability, have more accessible providers, not 20 minutes away, but someone
mhm,
closer to her, to the mom, so that she can then receive the care that she's looking for, where she has some autonomy, or she has autonomy, not some, she has autonomy over her healthcare, can receive the information she needs to make good, healthy decisions for the care of herself and her unborn child or children.
mhm.
So thank you for highlighting. I mean, listen, you
Thank
done dropped a whole lot of gems. We just out here catching pearls one after the other. We just gonna make a beautiful necklace because we catching so many pearls from this conversation. So,
you.
so thank you, Bree, for
Thank you for having
coming on. Now, Bree, folks gonna want to buy your book. They gonna want to follow you. They're gonna want to see what's going on with these healthy, beautiful twins that you got. Tell
me.
us and share with our platform first help us find out, where can we find your book? Where can we dream big and be big?
Okay, you can find the book. It's available on Amazon.
And
And
what's your author name, the full author name, so that they
uh,
can find it?
Brianna Jones, Briana, last name Jones. The book is about just kids believing in themselves and going after, and just encouraging our kids that if you dream it, you can actually be these things. It's not often that our kids get to see themselves in books, being many things. And you can be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be an entrepreneur, you could be a CEO, you could be so many things. And I hope that your kids can see themselves in this book. And I just want to show my beautiful twins as well. Them, you know,
Yes.
Ellen in the mirror, and it's a beautiful journey. It is a beautiful journey.
Oh, and at the end of the story, y'all, that is the golden part right there, seeing those beautiful babies and just how gorgeous they are. So you guys heard it here. You've known her book, and you know what? I'm gonna commit. We're gonna give away one of Bree's books. So I'm gonna connect with you, Bree. We'll get some books. We'll give it away to some of our followers. We'll support
Yes.
you. We know
Mhm.
how to put our money where our mouth is. Okay. We
Yes.
believe in supporting our community. We believe in representation. Did y'all spot those hues? She opened the page and you saw those hues, right? She represented all of our beautiful hues in that book. Make sure you get it, support her. And Bree, where can they find you on social media?
Bree Singer on Instagram, Bree Singer on Facebook, Bree Singer on Snapchat.
Bree
Yeah,
Singer is everywhere. Okay,
Bree
y'all.
Singer is
And
everywhere.
that's Bree spelled
Brissinger.
awesome, awesome. So you guys heard it here. We're gonna bring Bree back because let me tell you, I haven't even gotten to the conversation. Those little comments, those little racist seated comments that were said to her. We gonna talk about those. That's a whole other separate conversation because we need to
Right.
dissect all that stuff. Like you got 9 months to get. Y'all know I got a lot to
And
say about that.
too, like you would think that we would move past that, but I guess not.
It's
I
her
mean, well,
kids turn.
but
Say that again. Say that
I said,
again.
at the time 2019, but
Not
yeah,
that far
you
away. These babies are only 3 years old. That
for
is
me,
not that long
right?
ago.
You would think that we
Okay.
would, yeah.
We are 400 years past slavery. All these innuendos, these undertones, they should have stopped by now, but clearly they haven't. They are unfortunately in
Mhm.
our everyday life, but this is what we do. I'm glad that you called them out because sometimes I must say, some people don't even realize how they are vehicles of the instrument of racism. So it is up to us to call people out, raise their awareness as well,
Right.
educate them as well. And it's sad, but again, I must clarify: we should not feel responsible to educate others. If you don't feel like educating is not your responsibility, you do not
So,
have to. But if you feel motivated in a moment to set somebody straight, then go ahead, set them straight, educate them, raise their awareness, and raise their level of consciousness and their level of humanity. How about
mm,
that? All right, y'all. It's been wonderful to have this conversation. A very traumatic, concerning experience, but we're gonna turn these ashes into something beautiful,
yes.
and we're gonna do that by continuing to be advocates. Thankful that Bree shared with us all her advocates that she was surrounded with. Help. This is what Healthy Bump Club is. We want to be advocates. We want to build a village where we are supporting each other and supporting moms who are having these experiences so that we can be their safety net, so that they can feel like they have a community. That is the whole purpose of what we're doing. So if you feel empowered and you're thrilled about what we're doing on this platform, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hello. And make sure you check out our other videos. If you like this conversation, I am positive you're gonna like some other conversations as well. And you know what? Keep following us because I promise you, I'm gonna bring Bree back and talk to her when we're done. We're gonna have an ongoing conversation and really dissect out this experience of the unique experience of a Black woman in America. So thank you for following us. If you want to hop over to our Instagram page, make sure you look for healthybump.club. That's where we share all of our straight educational information. You will see educational videos here. Our midwife actually did a video on preeclampsia. So if you are inspired to learn more about preeclampsia, go ahead and I may tag it to this video. Go ahead and check out that video so that you can learn more about what preeclampsia is. We are raising that awareness in particular because we are disproportionately affected by it. And if you are so want to show folks that you are part of the village, go ahead and check out our apparel line by HBC Village. You'll see us on HBC Village on Instagram, and you also will see the link to our website here on this content. We love you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in next episode.